I still remember the exact moment my life shattered into a million pieces, then reassembled itself into something I never could have predicted. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Houston, sweltering heat pressing against the hotel windows, when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Emma, there are strange people in your apartment. Should I be concerned?" My heart stuttered. I was supposed to be enjoying a rare vacation, a reward I'd given myself after months of working doubles at the hospital. But something about those words made my stomach drop. I called Mrs. Chen immediately. Her voice was hesitant, apologetic. "I didn't want to bother you, dear, but there's been activity all morning. Moving trucks. Your father-in-law was here with a couple and some official-looking man with a briefcase. Robert, my father-in-law." "What do you mean, a couple?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They were measuring things, taking pictures. It looked like they were buying the place." The phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands. I hung up and immediately tried calling my husband, David, straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Nothing. Then I called Robert directly. He answered on the third ring, his voice carrying that self-satisfied tone I'd learned to dread over the past 3 years of marriage. "Emma, how's Houston treating you?" "What's going on at my apartment, Robert?" A pause, then a chuckle that made my blood run cold. "Oh, that? Yes, well, I've been meaning to talk to you about that." "Talk to me about what?" "I sold it, sweetheart. Got a fantastic price, too. You should be thanking me, really." The world tilted. I sat down hard on the hotel bed, my free hand gripping the comforter until my knuckles turned white. "You did what?" "Sold the apartment." "Don't worry. I'll help you find another place when you get back. Something smaller, more affordable." "You were living beyond your means anyway." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Robert, that's my apartment. You can't just sell my apartment." "Actually, I can. David's name is on the deed too, remember? Community property and all that. He signed the paperwork yesterday." We needed the money for something important. Something important. Those words echoed in my skull like a death knell. What could possibly be important enough to sell my home without even telling me? "Well, you know how much David cares about his sister. Sarah's been through so much lately. What with the divorce and everything. She needed a new car. Something reliable. Something that would cheer her up. The BMW dealership had this gorgeous X5, and when I saw the look on her face, he kept talking, but I couldn't hear him anymore. Not really. There was just white noise in my ears, a rushing sound like falling water. My apartment. The apartment I bought with my own money, years before I even met David. The apartment I'd worked 3 jobs to afford, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen for months. The apartment that held every memory of building myself up from. Nothing after my parents died. Gone. Sold to buy his daughter a luxury car. Double quotes. So you see, it all worked out for the best. Robert was saying when I tuned back in. Sarah's happy. We got a good price, and you and David can start fresh somewhere new. Maybe something in a less expensive neighborhood. I found my voice somewhere deep inside, cold and steady. "I'm coming home. Don't touch anything else. Honey, there's no need to be dramatic. It's done. You'll have to find another place when you get back. But don't worry. I'm sure we can find you something suitable. Maybe a nice little studio in." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone. I pulled up my bank app, my property records, my insurance documents. Everything I kept meticulously organized because I'd learned the hard way that the only person you could truly rely on was yourself, and that's when I saw it. The detail I'd almost forgotten. The clause I'd agreed to 5 years ago. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest. It started small, almost hysterical, then grew into something else entirely. Something dark and satisfied. Robert thought he'd sold my apartment. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what he'd actually done. I booked the first flight home. The plane ride felt endless. I sat in my window seat, staring at the clouds below, my mind racing through everything that had led to this moment. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? David had been distant for months. always taking his father's side in arguments, always making me feel like I was the unreasonable one for wanting boundaries, for wanting to keep something of my own. His family had never liked me. I wasn't wealthy like them, wasn't from their social circle. I was just a hospice nurse who'd clawed her way to stability through sheer determination. Robert had made that clear from the beginning. At our wedding, he'd pulled me aside and told me I should be grateful David had lowered himself to marry me. That I should remember where I came from. I'd smiled and thanked him for his kind words, because that's what you do when you're trying to build a life with someone you love. You swallow the poison and hope it doesn't kill you. But this was different. This wasn't just an insult. This was theft. This was violation. This was war. When the plane finally landed, I didn't go home. I went straight to my apartment building. Mrs. Chen met me in the hallway, her face creased with worry. "Emma, I'm so sorry." "I should have called sooner, but I thought maybe you knew." "It's okay," I told her, squeezing her hand. "You did the right thing." I stood in front of my apartment door. It was locked, but I still had my key. When I opened it, the space looked exactly the same. My furniture, my books. My grandmother's Afghan draped over the couch. They'd sold it furnished, apparently. Like I was just an accessory to be packaged with the real estate. I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Agent Harrison? This is Emma Foster. Yes, the apartment on Riverside. I need to report an unauthorized sale of government-protected property." The response was immediate and exactly what I'd expected. "We'll have a team there within the hour. Don't touch anything. And Miss Foster, you might want to find a comfortable place to wait. This is going to take a while." I sat on my couch in my apartment, and waited. You see, what Robert didn't know, what David didn't know because I never thought it mattered, was the very specific nature of my apartment purchase. 5 years ago, when I was house hunting, I'd found this place through a specialized government program. I'd been doing contract work for the VA, providing in-home hospice care for veterans. The program offered affordable housing to healthcare workers who served the veteran community, but there was a catch. The properties were technically government protected. They couldn't be sold without federal approval. The deed was in my name, yes, but it was flagged in every database that mattered. Adding David's name to the deed hadn't changed that. It had just added his name to a list of people who would be held accountable if anything went wrong. And selling government-protected property without authorization? That was a federal crime. Agent Harrison arrived 40 minutes later with 3 other agents and a woman from the Housing and Urban Development Office. "Miss Foster," Harrison said, shaking my hand. "Walk me through what happened." I told him everything, the vacation, the call from Mrs. Chen, the conversation with Robert, his smug confession about selling my home to buy his daughter a car. Harrison's expression grew darker with every word. "And you're certain you didn't authorize this sale? Didn't sign any paperwork?" "I've been in Houston for 6 days. I have hotel receipts, restaurant bills, everything timestamped. I knew nothing about this until this afternoon." "And your husband?" "His name is on the deed, but he doesn't have power of attorney. He can't sell without my signature." The HUD officer was typing furiously on her laptop. "The sale was recorded this morning. The buyers took possession at noon. They're currently at the property management office signing the final documents." Harrison pulled out his phone. "I need the names of everyone involved in this transaction. The buyers, the real estate agent, the notary, anyone who touched the paperwork. And the father-in-law," I added quietly. "Robert Foster. He orchestrated this. He told me himself." Harrison looked at me, and I saw something like sympathy in his eyes. "Miss Foster, you understand that if we pursue this, everyone involved could face serious charges." "Including your husband." "I understand. Are you sure you want to proceed?" I thought about my wedding day, about David's promises, about the life I thought we were building together. I thought about every time Robert had belittled me, dismissed me, treated me like an inconvenience in his son's life. I thought about my apartment, my home, my sanctuary, being sold like a piece of unwanted furniture. I'm sure what happened next moved with the efficiency of federal law enforcement. The buyers were stopped at the property management office before they could finalize anything. They were a nice couple, completely innocent in all of this. Horrified to discover they'd almost purchased government-protected property through fraudulent means. The real estate agent, a slick man named Gerald something, was brought in for questioning. He claimed ignorance, said Robert had assured him all the paperwork was legitimate. The notary public who'd allegedly witnessed my signature on the sale documents was also brought in. She went pale when confronted with the timestamps proving I was in Houston when I supposedly signed. "Mr. Foster provided the documents," she stammered. "He said his daughter-in-law had signed them before leaving on vacation. He seemed so respectable, so trustworthy. He said it was a family emergency that they needed to close quickly." "Did you actually witness her sign?" Harrison asked. Long pause. No, I didn't. That was when they brought in David." My husband walked into my apartment looking confused and annoyed. Like this was all some bureaucratic misunderstanding that would be cleared up with a phone call to his father's lawyer. Then he saw the federal agents, then he saw me. "Emma? What's going on? Dad said you were being difficult about the apartment sale, but this is ridiculous." "You can't just—" "Mr. Foster," Harrison interrupted. "You're aware that you signed documents authorizing the sale of government-protected property without the required federal approval?" David blinked. "Government-protected? What are you talking about?" "It's just an apartment. It's a HUD-protected property allocated to healthcare workers serving the veteran community. Your wife qualified for this housing through her work with the VA. The property cannot be sold without authorization from both the primary deed holder and the federal government." I watched the color drain from David's face. "I didn't know that. Dad said it was fine, that Emma had agreed, that we could sell it and use the money to help Sarah." "Did you verify that your wife had agreed?" Silence. "Did you even ask her, Mr. Foster?" More silence. "I trusted my father," David finally said, and I heard the first crack in his voice. "He said Emma knew that she was being stubborn about it, but that it was the right thing to do." Harrison glanced at me. I said nothing. "Your father forged your wife's signature on multiple legal documents," Harrison continued. "He orchestrated the sale of federal property without authorization. You participated in that sale by signing the necessary paperwork without conducting due diligence. At minimum, you're looking at fraud charges. At worst, theft of government property." David turned to me then, his eyes wide. "Emma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Dad said. He said you were just being selfish. That Sarah needed help. That we had to be there for family." "I am your family," I said quietly. "I was your family." The past tense landed like a slap. "Emma, please. We can fix this. We can make this right." But it was too late for that. It had been too late from the moment Robert mocked me on the phone, telling me I'd have to find another place, treating my home like it was his to give away. Robert arrived an hour later, flanked by his expensive lawyer. He walked into my apartment like he owned the place, which, I suppose he'd thought he did, and immediately started making demands. "This is absurd. I have every right to manage my son's property. Emma has been unreasonable about finances from the beginning, and we were simply taking necessary steps to—" "Mr. Foster," Harrison said, his voice cutting through Robert's bluster like a knife. "You're under investigation for fraud, forgery, and theft of federal property. I'd recommend you stop talking and listen to your attorney." For the first time since I'd met him, Robert looked uncertain. The lawyer whispered something in his ear. Robert's face went from uncertain to pale to almost gray. "I didn't know it was government property," he said, his voice losing all its usual confidence. "The deed had David's name on it. I thought as his father I could help him manage." "You forged Emma Foster's signature," Harrison interrupted. "You orchestrated the sale of her property without her knowledge or consent while she was out of state. You then used the proceeds to purchase a vehicle for your daughter. Is that accurate?" Robert looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded slightly. "I was helping my family," Robert said weakly. "By stealing from your daughter-in-law?" No answer. I stood up then, drawing everyone's attention. "I want to know one thing, Robert. Just one thing." He looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. "Did you ever see me as family? Or was I always just someone to use and discard?" He opened his mouth. closed it, opened it again. You were never good enough for David, he finally said, and there it was. The truth he'd been holding back for 3 years. You came from nothing. You had nothing to offer him except your paycheck. Sarah at least married well before her divorce. She knows what it means to be part of our family. You were always just ... temporary. The word hung in the air. Temporary. I smiled then, and it must have been a terrible smile because I saw Robert take a step back. You know what's temporary, Robert? Your freedom, your reputation, your ability to buy your children's love with stolen money. I turned to Agent Harrison. I want to press full charges. Against all of them. David made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Emma, please. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I love you. We can get through this. I looked at my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, and felt nothing but exhaustion. You let your father forge my signature. You sold my home without asking me. You did it to buy your sister a car she didn't need with money you had no right to touch. That's not a mistake, David. That's a choice. A series of choices. And none of them included me. The federal investigation moved forward with a kind of efficiency that only comes when multiple laws have been clearly, stupidly broken. Robert was charged with fraud, forgery, and attempting to sell government-protected property. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. This was exactly the kind of case they loved, clear-cut, well-documented, impossible to spin. David faced lesser charges, primarily for his role in signing the fraudulent documents. His lawyer argued he'd been manipulated by his father, that he was a victim too. I almost laughed when I heard that. Sarah, interestingly, knew nothing about where the money for her BMW had come from. She'd been told it was a gift from their father, a way to help her get back on her feet. When she found out the truth, she returned the car immediately. She called me, crying, apologizing. I never would have accepted it if I'd known, Emma. Never. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this. I believed her. Sarah had always been kind to me in her way. She was spoiled, yes, but not cruel. Not like her father. I know, I told her. This isn't your fault. What's going to happen to Dad? To David? I don't know, I said honestly. That's up to the courts now. The trial took 6 months. 6 months of depositions and evidence gathering and lawyers arguing over precedents and intentions. I testified about coming home from vacation to find my life dismantled, about Robert's mocking tone on the phone, about years of being treated like I wasn't good enough, wasn't family, wasn't worth basic respect. The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who was using the legal system to punish her in-laws for personal grievances, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature, the federal property designation, the money trail leading directly to Sarah's BMW, the recorded phone call where Robert admitted to the sale, where he told me I'd have to find another place. You will have to find another place, honey. The recording played in court, Robert's voice dripping with condescension. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Robert was found guilty on all counts. He received 2 years in federal prison and a substantial fine. David accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. The prosecutors acknowledged that he'd been manipulated, but that didn't excuse his failure to protect his wife's interests. Our divorce was finalized 2 weeks after his sentencing. I kept the apartment, of course. It was never legally sold. The fraudulent sale was voided. The innocent buyers were compensated by Robert's assets, and I returned to the home I'd almost lost. But it felt different now. Emptier. Not because of the furniture or the memories, but because of what I'd learned about trust and family and the lies we tell ourselves about the people we love. Mrs. Chen brought me soup the day I moved back in permanently. I'm so sorry, dear. About all of it. Don't be, I said, accepting the warm container. I learned something important. What's that? That I don't need anyone to save me. I can save myself. She smiled at that, squeezed my hand, and left me to unpack. A year has passed since that Tuesday in Houston. A year since my world fell apart and rebuilt itself into something I never expected. I still work as a hospice nurse. I still live in my apartment. I still wake up some mornings and remember the sound of Robert's laugh on the phone, the way he thought he'd won. But I also remember the look on his face when he realized what he'd actually done. When he understood that the apartment he'd sold so casually, so arrogantly, was protected by the very government he'd spent his life looking down on. There's a bitter satisfaction in that. A justice that feels both right and hollow. David tried to contact me a few months ago. A long email about regret and therapy and how he'd finally understood how toxic his father was, how he should have chosen me, chosen us. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. Some relationships, once shattered, are better left as broken pieces rather than poorly glued together mockeries of what they once were. I'm dating now, casually. A kind radiologist at the hospital who thinks my studio apartment is cozy and charming, who never once asks why I don't want something bigger, something more impressive. Sarah and I text occasionally. She's rebuilding her life too, learning to separate herself from her father's influence. We'll never be close, but there's a tentative understanding between us. And me? I'm learning to trust again, slowly, carefully, but I'll never again put someone's name on my deed. I'll never again assume that love means sacrifice without boundaries. I'll never again let someone make me feel temporary in my own life. Because I learned something in that hotel room in Houston, something that crystallized as I listened to Robert mock me over the phone. I learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone because they're kind, because they're accommodating, because they don't fight back right away. I learned that patience isn't weakness. And I learned that sometimes, just sometimes, the person you dismiss as powerless is the one holding all the cards. Robert learned that too. In a federal prison cell, with 2 years to think about the apartment he should never have touched, the daughter-in-law he should never have underestimated, and the government-protected property that became his undoing. I think about him sometimes, about whether he's figured out yet where he went wrong. Whether he understands that it wasn't the forgery or the fraud or even the theft that destroyed him. It was the arrogance. The absolute certainty that someone like me, someone from nothing, someone temporary, could never be a threat. I smile when I think about that. And then I make myself a cup of tea, curl up on my couch in my apartment, and remember that I'm not temporary at all. I'm permanent. I'm home. And no one will ever take that from me again.